I'm into authors now. I don't know why. So I said, well, let me try to get the book first and make sure this is on, in target line. Let me read it. And when I read it, kind of blew me away. We have a lot of similarities. So I just wanted to highlight you.
The book is called This Means More. It's Bigger Than Me. And I wrote the book because during the pandemic, I had just come back from China. I was trying to figure out what was going on with my life. I had expected to be abroad for years, came back within 9 months, and I did not know what was left or what was next for my life. And so and as I started to reflect back over my life, I really started to see that there were many different pieces. There were many different puzzle pieces of my life that were coming together, and they really shape who I am and define who I am. And so that's what I have in my book. I walk through my life. I walk through how each chapter has meant more, and how I've seen the bigger picture. And then I encourage others to take inventory of their own life, to really see their life and see it in a different light, because we see it in different, we tend to focus on silos, and not take a step back and really look at the bigger picture of, yes, this season was hard, but when I look at the grand scheme of things and I look at the bigger picture of my life, it fits. It was necessary for me to go through that. Moments of pain has now turned into purpose. And so I am excited that all of that is in the book. Some of it is really deep. Some of it is light and fun. But all of that is who I am. And so I didn't want to hide the hard parts. I wanted to just to show it all, because people can look at your social media, they can look at your life and say, wow, you've traveled this, and they think that you have this grand, shiny life. But really, if you really get to know me and you see, right, we've all been through stuff. We've all gone through hard things. So this is my journey, the hard parts, the good parts, all of it.
Okay. So, well, two things. Let's stay on the book for now.
Okay.
Because I really want to kind of express this in a way and focus on it. But you said two things: silos, and seasons. Those are two things that resounded, and then pain and purpose. Let's talk about silos, because I literally just had a conversation with a person 3 days ago about that, which essentially is, where I feel we as a people have a pain point that no one really talks about, is that we collectivize in very small pockets, right? So we play to each other's strengths, but the way our community works now isn't the same as what it did in the 70s and the 80s, right? I also have a theory that that's because there's less stress within the communities. Now, there is a lot of stress. It is not the same thing as what happened pre-civil rights or during the crack era, Reaganomics. That was different. I've had elders, my father even said, it used to be a time where you couldn't even call for authorities in the neighborhood because it would be a no-no. It wouldn't be something that you would do. So the neighborhood became a silo. It policed itself. It conducted things differently within its own fishbowl. Right. That's good and bad. Right. It's good and bad. So you're speaking on the silo of the chapters of your life being the experiences that you have to go through.
Right.
Not to talk about this part of the book too much, because I want you listeners to buy it. Right. So I want to, but I wanted to touch on this because I read it and I understand that now for clarity, that the silo that you're referring to is the experience of your life that we would consider, like you mentioned, childhood, then adolescence, then adulthood. And you have compartmentalized those. Now I follow you. So you've compartmentalized those into these experiences, which of course you documented, right? But also you survived them.
Right. And
I use that word specifically based on what's in the book, right? So you talk about your life story in a way that you called it a quick read. It's a compelling read. Granted, it's 100 pages plus, but I had to read it 3 times. It's such a wow moment for me, but now unfortunately I'm becoming biased on it because I relate to it so much now, reading it again. I was like, this is half me.
Right.
Which is why I'm pleased that we were able to highlight it the way that we have.
So when I say a season of my life, I'm, saying those when I was the partying adult, right? And then I had a season where different journeys of therapy,
We'll get to that.
and then a different season of what I call growth. And so those are the different seasons that I'm referring to. And within a year, I can be going through different seasons, just like the weather is changing for different seasons. And I think life mirrors that in a lot of ways. Yeah. And it's all, again, based on our experiences, based on how we see things, how we view it, our perspective on them. But all of those, so there could be multiple seasons.
Sure.
Within.
In the respect of relationship building, I won't dive into that. Like, we'll save that for another episode, right? Now, you do talk about this in your book, though. Mm-hmm. You do talk about, how the aspects of what you saw in a person at the time, right? What you needed from them at the moment and what you thought you needed, the dependencies of an individual that you're with, even not wanting to leave them when you have opportunities in front of you. And I respect that. So I won't split the hair when we start to do the dualities of what season is by comparison to that, right. But another time. That's we'll to be continued that one. So when it comes down to your life story in the book, not to give a lot away, you do talk about the origin, essentially your origin story, which takes you from West Texas, small town values, right? Mm-hmm. Father being a truck driver, mother taking care of the children. How many siblings with you?
It was a total of 5 of us. 5
siblings in a household. Small summary, and you give me the nod when I'm telling way too much, right? So the small summary in that story, though, is that there was a rift between you observing what was happening with your parents, in the parenting structure, how it affected the children, right? Dealing with the way your father was in but not in, and right. But the things that he taught you structurally as well. So you took notes from that also, but it's not as though it didn't create a bit of a rift,
right,
with both of them, and even some distance between your siblings. I just covered about 3 chapters worth of stuff right there, right? That's my small summary. I did, though, for the sake of the discussion, wanted to talk about, as much as you want, the nature of your father and your relationship, your mother's relationship, and then your siblings' relationship. Yeah, we'll just frame those that way. So with him being in the household the way that he was, how did that impact your relationship with him?
So I am daddy's girl to the core. I'm the youngest of the 5. And so, and then the daddy's girl, I was also the numbers girl. So me and my dad, we have a very close relationship. And to the extent that I can, now talk to him as a friend. But growing up, right, he was a truck driver. He was not at home during the week. And then he was at home on the weekends. And then our weekends were spent as a family, having a good time. We were the party house. I learned to count because watching my dad and his friends play dominoes, and my dad taught me how to count because I would count dominoes for him. Okay. And so I'm a daddy's girl to the core. Now, I've also been able to express to my dad certain things, right? Hard things that were hard for him to hear, about how I feel, about how some things had transpired in my childhood. But me and my dad have that kind of relationship where we can have those conversations, right? Sure. The easy conversations and the tough conversations.
Sure.
So,
I think that's good, but that was a road. It definitely took some time for you to get there.
Yes.
And additionally, there was a road that you took with your mother. So that relationship, as documented, right, in the book, that became a separate entity on its own.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the relationship with my mom is different, right? Typically in the average family, the mothers are the foundation. They're the rock. They're the ones that hold everybody together. They're the ones that everybody looks to and, and say, Mom, what would you do? But there are a small few of us, because it's not I know, actually I'm learning that maybe more people relate to my story than what I know. But that wasn't my experience with my mom. I think that she did the best that she could. I think that she had her own trauma that she was living through. And so she just didn't know how. And so unfortunately, we don't have the mother-daughter bond that, you would think that you would have with, or that I know, people have with their moms. Sure. We don't have that. And it's one that I've had to it's one that I've had to grieve.
Sure.
Had to grieve that, that may not ever happen. And so, you just kind of have to accept that, and move forward. Now, still talk to my mom. We talk, call each other, we'll call. We don't talk often, but when we do, we'll catch up. And, I've just had to be okay with that, with where that is. Mm-hmm. For me, it's been trust, it's been boundaries, things like that. For me, operating as a healthy adult, I've had to make some decisions to say, I have to have these boundaries in my life. And if you don't want to operate in them, that's okay. Then you
be over there.
You have to be arm's length.
Sure.
And so that's where we are today. And, I thankfully, and what I call it out in the book is, while I did not get what I needed from her, there have been people who have been placed and brought into my life who have been able to nurture me in those ways. And so I'm so grateful for that.
Like a surrogacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So grateful for that. So, when I talk about community in my book, I'm talking about my friends, but I am also talking about, some of the other benefits that have come along with having those friends and having their parents step in for me.
I appreciate you saying it, because even though everyone may not go through the entirety of what you went through, there are very much aspects of what you go through that people are going to relate to. As you speak, and I read it, but like as you speak, I'm saying, yep, been through that. Yep, feel that way, right? Yeah. I think, there's no silver lining in that, honestly, because you did say it correctly, in my opinion. Just say that, you grieve it. Because it's not a nuclear format. It's not the format that one would expect. Definitely doesn't happen outside of our community very often, where you see that level of strife between both units. Right? There's a distance with one, there's a separate or a different distance with the other, and you have to reconcile that. You can reconcile with one wholly, where the other one is still kind of, right. And maybe there's some clinical, studies that can show where, because that's a trauma situation.
Right.
So where one would relate to the traumatic instance from the person, being that that's a mother as opposed to a father, being that you are a female as opposed to a male. Like it's,
right.
There's a bond there that doesn't break, but it does get redefined.
Right.
I'm speaking in prose, but it's true as you've documented. Right. I think for an artist, though, the silver lining that I wanted to mention is that for an artist, this makes for very much good content, because you get to purge.
Right.
But you also get to find out something about yourself in creating a literary work. So now A, I can, right. and B, what else do I need to talk about? What else is there? But good on you. And I know that wasn't without therapy, and that wasn't without a lot of difficult conversations, which we will talk about.
Right.
So in the third portion of that, with the book, in terms of your upbringing side, because the book kind of falls, in my opinion, your book falls into three areas, right? It falls into how you grew up and the conditions to which you grew up and how that affected you, the career path you chose, and then the blessings that you decided to take along the way.
Yeah.
Am I missing a part of the book?
Oh, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
If you need an agent. Okay, so then the thing that I did want to dive into then would be very briefly, though, because there is content in the book that I believe that people need to read to understand fully about this. So the sibling dichotomy that you had, the sibling dichotomy that you had was interesting, but you also dealt with loss, right? To which that loss would have essentially been the glue of your family.
Right.
Again, you give me the nod, right? But if you allow me to summarize it, because out of respect and also out of the fact that it's in the book, that's not really a part that we really want to dive into, right? But with your siblings growing up that way, the one that you looked up to the most would have been your brother, to whom which you did lose tragically. And the process of that did create a bit of an uprooting of the family structure. And I think you said it the best way is that people have to grieve differently. So they did, and you just never kind of came back to it as a whole. Right. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's a very good summary. Very, very, very good.
You can tell I've done this before, right? All right. So, but I'd like to leave it there because there's 2 chapters at least in the book where you touch on this and you go deeper into how this affected you psychologically, how it affected the family, which I think is important. I can't summarize as beautiful as you wrote it, so I believe deserves a lot more credit and a lot more attention. And again, I would like for this to be a purchase that you see much higher than what you already have, which you've already seen some numbers. But I want to make sure that you have the availability to talk about that more than me.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask you this. So pain to purpose, right? Clearly that's a pain point. The purpose, though, where did you see a loss like that becoming an application of where your purposes could be?
So I was, 16 years old when I lost my brother. He was 20 at the time. And for years, I avoided grieving, avoided dealing with that loss. I just suppressed it in the back of my mind. And then it was literally 12 years later, I looked up and I was on high blood pressure medication and dealing, just frustrated. And I found myself angry a lot. And I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to carry this just frustration and so it was a matter of you got to deal with these emotions. You got to, find a different way to channel them. And so once I started going through therapy and started getting some coping skills from therapy to help, manage those feelings that I have, then I started to be able to accept, right, that my brother was no longer here. And then the opportunity came, what kind of person was he? How can I carry out his legacy through the things that I do? And so my brother was a great, great, great person. And so I've always tried to be, kind and nice, not because of, that's because of who I am and how I was raised, but it's just knowing that he was always a light. Everywhere he went, he was always a light. And so knowing that I can be a light for somebody else, he was always encouraging somebody else. I can be an encourager to somebody else. And so that is one of the things with the book is I want to encourage people to really take that deeper dive into their life. I know, again, some parts are going to be hard to go back and sit down and look at, but it's needed and it's necessary so that you can free yourself internally from some things, and then you can go out and then help somebody else, right? And so now that I've experienced grief, I can help somebody else who's going through grief.
Sure. I feel like that's a perfect segue, though, in order to discuss exactly how your book is formatted. One of the benefits of this book, just my personal opinion, because I've read maybe 3 of them that have a reflection point in them, and it's new to me, and maybe it's just because of my selection of this type of book format. There's fiction, nonfiction, self-help, things like that. Perhaps I haven't read enough self-help or self-reflection books to see that this format is common, but I found it amazing. And the reason why I highlight that is based on what you just said is because you do challenge the reader to look into themselves, but you also do something else. So you discuss your every chapter has a discussion or your outline of how this was for you. That's your story. So it gives that story within that chapter. At the end of that chapter, you do give either a Bible verse or a complete further explanation of the parable in the Bible, which now, spoiler alert, allows you to say that your journey is rooted in your faith.
Absolutely.
Used to say that was rooted in the church, but that means you kind of belong to one entity, and that's not the case with you. But the faith in itself carried on throughout the entirety. I want to touch on that in a little bit too. But the way the format works, again, is that your chapter is dedicated to your journal of your story, but then it also gives the parable within the Bible verse, and then you ask, what does this mean to you? And it blew my mind. It blew my mind. Now, again, as I have some similarities in terms of the stories that you have, and I've seen that in my own self-reflection, to be asked what it meant to me, I was like, oh, that's a perfect way to end this thing, this chapter. Now we can go into the next chapter feeling as though that's a task that's going to be a part of the book. Fantastic formatting, by the way. So outside of the origin story, right? In addition to this, you do talk about the career path that you followed, which ends up being accounting, right? And you said that you were a numbers girl from the jump. So accounting would probably have been no surprise to you that that's kind of what you wanted to do?
Yes, I've known since 7th grade that I wanted to be an accountant. Like I said, I started with numbers because my dad was playing dominoes with his friends. So that's how I learned to count. And then I would always ask for flashcards for birthday gifts because, you know, that taught me multiplication and division just quickly. And then in the 7th grade, so my mom was not very good with managing money. Sure. And because my dad was a truck driver, you know, he needed her to kind of handle that piece. And so it got to a point to where I ended up taking over the family, managing the family finances. And that started around the 7th grade. At that time, that was fun for me. So I would each week would sit down with my dad. He'd say, I'm getting paid this amount. Then we'd break down the bills. I'd write the checks. And, you know, he'd take me to the different places. At that time, we were still writing checks and we were going into
That's a different era, by the way.
That's a different era.
It's a different era. Okay.
We were going into the light company to go pay the bill at the light company.
A different era, by the way.
Yeah, it wasn't online or any of that. And so that started for me in the 7th grade. So I started doing that for the family. And to this day, I am still my dad's accountant, manager, whatever you want to call it. I still pay all his bills. Yeah. We don't write checks anymore. I got him away from that. And I got him on auto pay. So, but yeah, so that journey started just, again, it really started when I started counting dominoes and numbers. I've loved it. I do love it. That's what I do as a career. And, you know, now I work with numbers every day. One of my side things is I'm a director of finance at the church that I attend. And so I'm working with numbers with them.
Sure. And
then with my financial coaching business, helping people win with their money, you know, more numbers. Numbers is what I do.
Numbers. So let's talk about being an accountant, right? And as you documented in the book, though, your journey, what you did figure out, though, is that this was a calling. You did very well at it, but you were also presented with an opportunity to stop it. So there was a all call. I mean, how did this even come about that you got an opportunity to leave your career and turn and parlay that into not only a different career of teaching language, but leaving the country and living somewhere else?
So back in 2018, I was laid off from my job as an accountant. And I was in a place where I was burned out and tired because of how work at this place was structured.
So not the job, but the people.
Both.
Really?
Yeah. Some of it was both. It was both. And I was in a place where I was questioning, well, maybe accounting is not for me. Okay. And so because I was in a place where thankfully I was debt free, and I knew that I was getting laid off, and I just needed a break. I did not want to immediately go back to another company. I wanted to really take a step back and kind of ask myself and decide, is this something I still want to do? Yes, I was, I loved it and was passionate about it. But let me take a step back. Let me step away and see what happens, see what else is out there, see if maybe I would be interested in something else. And so I had that opportunity, and, in a position to where I could go and move and live abroad. And so I was like, this is the perfect opportunity. It all makes sense. I don't have any bills. I don't have any responsibilities. I'm single. I don't have any children. If I'm going to do this, this is the time in my life now to do it. And so I did it. Yeah. I did it. And it was, all of my friends were like, you're absolutely crazy. You are nuts. They also know that I am the crazy friend that will say, hey, I'm moving out the country tomorrow, and I will go. And so I essentially did that. And while I was away, and let me back up. So I knew I wanted to live abroad. And I saw actually an opportunity. It was an advertisement that I saw that I started looking more into, but it was an advertisement that I saw on Instagram. This company that does international tours. Okay. They posted something about, hey, are you interested in living abroad, and do you have a valid passport? And at that time, there were no requirements for me to have any teacher certifications or anything like that. And so for where I was at that time in my life, seeing that, I was just like, this is perfect. This is it. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. It was an opportunity for me to, I still had health insurance, because that was one of the things that was important for me, is while I wanted to be able to travel the world, but I still wanted to be able to make some sort of income, have health insurance, be a responsible adult. Be an adult. And so this opportunity had all of that. And so this is the perfect fit. Sure. And so I took it, and I ended up in Shanghai, China. Okay. Teaching English as a second language.
More on that later. That's in the book as well. Okay, the journey, the Fievel goes east, because it wasn't west, right? But you ever? Never mind. I want to talk about Fievel goes west so bad with somebody. I kid you not. I just love it though. It's an odyssey. This is your odyssey that you documented. Mm-hmm. We're not going to talk about Fievel. We'll get there. Nonetheless, that's in the book. But the journey that you had, that you documented there, it talks about a little bit of a decision that you had to make as well, based on, granted, you mentioned that you don't have any children, but you do have a godson. Yeah. So a
whole bunch of godchildren. Yes.
But to take that back, let's not gloss over it. There are certain people who look at godchildren as a inherent responsibility. I do. And then also there are people who just take the title and say, okay, cool, thanks. Right. And that's not you. No. Clearly, based on how you've described this situation, which was a decision that was either I'm not leaving or I am leaving, but look what I'm leaving behind. Right. Yes. And I want to stop it there so that they can read the book.
Yes. Yeah. I almost did not make it to China because of, you'll have to read the book as to why I almost did not make it. Right. Yeah.
And then also a thing not to gloss over is that this is not a common situation. Right. It is rare, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and so is she. It is rare that you see individuals with a year-round tan walking around in mainland and or subjunct areas of China. It is extremely rare. And when you do see it, quite honestly, it's because of the migration patterns of continental Africa, as opposed to African Americans that are taking opportunities. Usually the separation is that we would be there on business as opposed to others coming in to look for work, right? And doing an anchor program and things like that. It's just not the situation. But we are in such a minority at that location that it is met with a little bit of unique interactions that we will talk about in our next segment. However, I'm glad that you documented it this way in the book. Then COVID happens. I mean, that's no spoiler to that.
Right.
Because your timeline of you being in Shanghai was 2020?
It was 2019 leading into 2020.
2019 leading into 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting when you think about it, though, because the onset of COVID as it hit America was more of a 2020 conversation.
Yes.
But you were there in the 2019 onset, which means you were kind of on the leading edge of what this pandemic item was.
Right. And coming back and having to abruptly come back. And
Sure.
some of my belongings are still in China today. You know, that was part of my travel journey, and that's a fun story for me to tell, that whole journey.
So within the contents of the book, you have 3 essential segments, like we said before, which is essentially your origin story. And then you also talk about the career path you chose. And then essentially the opportunity to travel, right? Which I believe is a special testimony based on what is rare within our community, number one. I'll also give you some highlights too. Your origin story is unique, and I related to it, and I appreciate you being able to share it. And I'm sure now that you've received your feedback that other people are as well. Additionally, I find it extremely rare that I can ever meet a person of color who has gone to school and always wanted to be the same thing that they are right now. That's a dreamscape in most instances. So I applaud you for that. And then third, tertiary, big word, $5 words on Saturday, by the way. The fact that you did something that is very unique to us as a people, not to travel. Traveling is fine. Where you went and what you experienced in that process, which again, a lot of this is described in her book. And that's why, you know, we of course want to highlight that on the platform, but we also want to give you just enough to make you interested. If you want to know about what this small town girl decided to do in order to become much more than what she was statistically destined to become, you should read this book. If you want to understand what it's like for an experience of a person of color in a foreign country that is very rarely seen someone like us, you should get this book. If you want to know what it is like to take the journey of knowing that this destination isn't going to stop here, that there is more purpose to be found within the struggle that you're enduring, you should buy this book. This Means More. It's Bigger Than Me, Nina Evans. Where can you find this book?
You can find this book on my website, which is www.ninaevansllc.com. You can find it on Amazon book and the ebook. You can find the on Barnes & Noble's Nook. You can find it on Apple Books as well.